Wade Stephen Wilson has spent 376 days on death row, his fate sealed by a judge's gavel in 2024. But what drove him to that brutal night in 2019 when he strangled Kristine Melton in her bed and then ran over Diane Ruiz with her own car, leaving her body battered beyond recognition? To understand the monster he became, we need to go back to where it all began. Hit that like button and subscribe to be part of our growing community. Also, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from as we dive into this chilling story. Wade Stephen Wilson came into the world on May 20th, 1994, in a small hospital in Tallahassee, Florida, born to parents who were just kids themselves. His biological father, Stephen Testaseca, only 14, and his mother, a tender 13. They named him Anthony at first, but life was too much for the young couple to handle. Unable to raise a baby amid their own chaos, they made the heartbreaking choice to give him up for adoption shortly after his birth. He landed in the care of Steve and Candace Wilson, a stable, church-going family from an upper-middle-class background in Tallahassee. The Wilsons already had 2 daughters, and they welcomed Wade with open arms, renaming him and raising him as their own in a home filled with love and opportunity. His adoptive parents later described him as a joyful child in those early days, full of energy and affection for his family, the kind of kid who lit up the room with his laughter. But even in that seemingly safe world, cracks started to show. Growing up in Tallahassee wasn't marked by poverty or neglect. Far from it. The family had enough to send his sisters to private colleges, aiming for careers like doctors, and Wade had the same doors open to him. Yet something simmered beneath the surface. As a young boy, Wade suffered multiple head injuries, including at least 4 concussions from accidents and rough play, which left him rattled and prone to mood swings. His adoptive parents tried to get help, but the system let them down. A quick patch-up at the doctor, no real diagnosis, no follow-up care. By age 11, Wade confided in them that he felt like he was going crazy, his mind a whirlwind he couldn't control. What secrets was he hiding even then, as the boy who seemed so happy began to pull away? As he entered his teen years, the troubles deepened. Wade attended Lincoln Memorial Middle School and later Chili's High School, both in Tallahassee. But school became a battleground. Classmates remember him as troubled from the start, quick to anger, always on the edge of a fight. He got into scraps on the playground and hallways, his fists flying over small slights, hinting at a rage that no one could quite tame. Petty crimes crept in too: shoplifting, vandalism, the kind of mischief that starts small but builds like a storm. Substance abuse followed close behind. Drugs and alcohol became his escape, pulling him further from the straight path his parents hoped for him. By high school, he was withdrawing, turning erratic and depressed, skipping classes and hanging with the wrong crowd. His family watched helplessly as the joyful little boy slipped into a shell of himself, battling what seemed like undiagnosed mental health issues without the tools to fight back. Those early brushes with violence and chaos, were they just warning signs or the first threads of a darker path weaving together? In the days leading up to October 6, 2019, Wade Stephen Wilson's relationship with his girlfriend, Melissa Montanez, was a volatile mix of passion and chaos, setting the stage for his erratic behavior that night. The couple, who had been dating for several months, shared a turbulent dynamic marked by frequent arguments and Wilson's unpredictable moods. Melissa, who ran Mila Spa in Fort Myers, Florida, described Wilson as someone who could be charming one moment and explosive the next, a pattern that worsened as he spiraled into drug use and mental instability. Court records and her testimony reveal that Wilson was grappling with untreated mental health issues, exacerbated by heavy methamphetamine use, which fueled his impulsivity and aggression. On October 5, 2019, the tension boiled over. Wilson and Melissa had spent the day together, but their time was far from peaceful. They argued fiercely, likely over his erratic behavior and her growing frustration with his inability to stay grounded. That evening, Wilson's agitation peaked when he took Melissa's car, a gray Ford, without her permission, leaving her stranded at her apartment complex in Fort Myers. According to Melissa's later statements to police, He drove off in a huff, ignoring her calls and texts as she pleaded for him to return the vehicle. This act of defiance wasn't new. Wilson had a history of impulsive decisions, often acting out when he felt cornered or rejected. The car theft left Melissa furious but also worried as she sensed his mental state was unraveling. What was he planning as he sped away into the night, the hum of the engine drowning out her voice? Wilson's history of abandonment also played a role that dreadful night. Born to teenage parents who gave him up for adoption, he carried a sense of rejection that lingered despite the love of his adoptive family. This emotional wound, coupled with his struggles in school, where he was known for fights and petty crimes, left him with a simmering resentment toward the world. The argument with Melissa, where he felt dismissed and powerless, reignited these feelings, pushing him into a reckless headspace. And his life was about to take a dark twist and intertwine with two innocent women who had nothing to do with his life. Kristine Melton, 35, was a kind-hearted waitress from Illinois who had moved to Cape Coral, Florida, with a friend a few years earlier. She lived in a quiet duplex just 4 houses away from her mother, Katie, to help care for her as she battled the early stages of Alzheimer's disease. Kristine was her mom's best friend and protector, always watching out for scams and making sure she was safe. She was quick-witted, loved cats dearly, and dreamed of becoming a mother someday. Described by her cousin as someone who made everyone feel safe and understood, Kristine was the godmother to her niece or nephew, full of love and laughter that lit up any room. Her life was simple but full of hope, until it was cut short in the most senseless way. Diane Ruiz, 43, was a devoted mother of 2 teenage sons, Zane and Brandon, and a hard-working bartender at the Moose Lodge in Cape Coral. She had been engaged to her fiancé and was known among her coworkers as the heartbeat of the bar, caring, loyal, and always there for others with her booming laugh that could be heard from a mile away. For 5 years, she never missed a shift, walking the same route to work every day after dropping off her boys. Engaged in building a stable life, Diane had a personality that magnified joy and support for everyone around her. Her family remembers her as the rock who always had their backs, her sudden loss leaving a void that echoes with unimaginable pain. The nightmare began on the evening of October 6, 2019, in Fort Myers, Florida, at a lively spot called Buddha Live, where live music pulsed through the crowd. Wade Stephen Wilson, then 25 and fresh out of a rocky night with his girlfriend Melissa Montanes, walked into the bar looking for a way to kill time. There he spotted Kristine Melton chatting with her friend Stephanie Sailors. The 2 women, out for a fun night, struck up a conversation with Wilson, who seemed charming enough at first. As the bar closed around 2 a.m., the trio decided to keep the party going. They headed to the nearby home of Kristine's friend, Jason Shepard, where they hung out, drank, and talked until the early morning hours, the Florida humidity hanging heavy in the air. By around 8 a.m. on October 7th, the group finally made their way to Kristine's modest duplex in Cape Coral, a peaceful neighborhood where neighbors waved hello and cats roamed freely. Stephanie crashed on the couch, exhausted from the night, while Kristine and Wilson slipped into her bedroom, the hours they spent together seemingly building Kristine's trust in him. Stephanie woke up first, around 9:30 a.m., feeling the haze of a hangover. She chatted briefly with Kristine and Wilson, who seemed normal, nothing out of place. Everything was fine, Stephanie later recalled, her voice breaking at trial. Trusting her friend, she grabbed her things and left, waving goodbye as she stepped out into the morning sun. Kristine, still in her pajamas, waved back from the doorway, oblivious to the danger lurking. Little did she know that simple goodbye would be her last. Alone now with Kristine, Wilson's dark urges took over. As she climbed back into bed for some much-needed rest, he approached silently from behind. In a sudden, brutal act, he wrapped his hands around her neck and strangled her with crushing force while she lay there, vulnerable and asleep. Kristine fought for her life, her body convulsing in panic. But Wilson didn't stop. The medical examiner later described the scene. Her face purpled from the lack of oxygen, petechia, tiny burst blood vessels in her eyes from the desperate struggle, and deep bruises ringing her throat like a grim necklace. It took agonizing minutes for her to go still, Her dreams of motherhood and caring for her mom shattered in an instant. The emotional weight of this betrayal hit hard. Kristine had invited a stranger into her home out of kindness, only to be killed in the very bed where she felt safest. Her family, already strained by her mother's illness, was left reeling. Her brother Robert spoke of the horror of their mom reliving the loss during Alzheimer's episodes, a pain that never fades. Wilson didn't linger in grief. Coldly, he rifled through her things, grabbing her phone, purse, and keys before stealing her white Grand Jeep Cherokee from the driveway. He drove off around 10 a.m., the engine humming as if nothing had happened, leaving Kristine's body crumpled under the covers where her cats would soon curl up beside her cooling form. But his rage wasn't spent. High on the thrill, he headed toward Fort Myers to confront Melissa at her salon business, Mila Spa. Spotting her in the parking lot around noon, he pulled up aggressively, jumped out, and tried to drag her into the stolen Jeep by her hair and arm. "Get in the car!" he snarled, his face twisted in fury. Melissa fought back fiercely, screaming and clawing until she broke free, running inside as he punched and grabbed at her. She called 911 immediately, her voice trembling as she described the attack, giving police a description of the vehicle and Wilson. Officers spotted him shortly after, shirtless and erratic, but he sped away in a brief chase before they lost him. Melissa's narrow escape was a miracle, but it left her battered and terrified, a stark reminder of how close death had come again. Fueled by the same senseless bloodlust, Wilson circled back to Cape Coral around 1 p.m., cruising the streets in Kristine's Jeep. That's when he saw Diane Ruiz walking her usual route to the Moose Lodge after her morning routine. Perhaps thinking of her sons or her upcoming wedding? She was just a regular woman heading to work, her laughter soon to echo in the bar. Wilson pulled over, rolling down the window with a fake smile. "Hey, can you tell me how to get to the school around here?" he asked innocently, luring her closer. Trusting and helpful, Diane leaned in to give directions. But as she realized something was wrong and tried to back away toward the passenger door to escape, Wilson exploded. His hands shot out the window, grabbing her by the neck and arm, pulling her partially into the vehicle in a sudden, violent yank. She fought back fiercely, scratching at his arms, trying to twist free. But the confined space of the Jeep's cab trapped her. He strangled her with crushing force, his grip leaving deep bruises around her throat, while punching her face and body to subdue her. The whole assault unfolded in seconds, a blur of motion that wouldn't have lasted long enough for immediate intervention. Diane's body went limp from the lack of oxygen, her eyes bulging in terror. But she wasn't done fighting yet. Wilson shoved her out onto the roadside grass in the empty lot, hidden partially by tall weeds and a tree, thinking her dead. But when he saw her chest still rising faintly, alive, he got back in the driver's seat, shifted into gear, and ran over her body repeatedly, 10 to 20 times, backing up and forward like erasing a mistake. The medical examiner's report described her remains as mangled beyond recognition, like spaghetti, with massive trauma from the tires crushing her skull, torso, and limbs. Vultures had begun circling by the time her body was found 3 days later on October 10th, after a tip led police there, a tragic delay that amplified the horror for her family. Diane's sons, Zane and Brandon, were devastated. She was their world, the mom who never missed a beat. Her fiancé grieved a future wedding stolen away. The randomness of it all, the way a simple walk to work turned into unimaginable agony, shattered the community, leaving loved ones with questions that clawed at their hearts. Why her? Why so much suffering? With Diane's broken body fading in his rearview mirror, Wilson drove on, his hands still stained with the evidence of his crimes. Around 3 p.m., he abandoned the bloody Jeep near a Sam's Club in Cape Coral, wiping it down hastily to cover his tracks. He thought he could slip away into the shadows of Cape Coral, but his arrogance and a single phone call turned his escape into a trap. After dumping Kristine's stolen Jeep, Wilson didn't hide. He bragged. Fueled by methamphetamine and a twisted thrill, he dialed his biological father, whom he had been in contact with, Stephen Testaseca, multiple times that afternoon. "I just killed 2 people, he boasted in graphic detail, describing how he strangled Kristine in her bed and then beat Diane before running her over like roadkill. "I choked that bitch out," he said coldly about Kristine, laughing as he recounted Diane's final moments. Testaseca, at first stunned and thinking it was one of Wilson's tall tales, he knew his son was a good storyteller, listened in horror. But as the calls kept coming, the reality sank in. Testaseca's wife joined, putting the phone on speaker, and they relayed every word to the police while keeping Wilson on the line. "Where are you?" "I'll send an Uber to pick you up," Testaseca said, playing along to keep him talking. Wilson, oblivious, spilled his location: a quiet neighborhood in Cape Coral. By evening, as the sun dipped low, Wilson had broken into an empty house to lay low. He pried open a window around dusk, slipped inside, and tried to wash away his sins, showering off the blood and grime, stealing clean clothes from the closet, and raiding the fridge for popcorn and 5 cans of White Claw hard seltzer. He even lounged on the couch, high and untethered, as if it were just another lazy night. But the police were closing in, tipped off by Testaseca's intel and Melissa's earlier 911 call describing the Jeep and Wilson's wild behavior. On October 8th, 2019, just 24 hours after the murders, a SWAT team surrounded the house. They burst through the door around midday, guns drawn, and found Wilson inside, caught red-handed with no fight left. He surrendered without a word, his face blank as the cuffs snapped on. Officers arrested him initially for burglary, grand theft auto, battery on Melissa, and petite theft. But the real charges loomed: 2 counts of first-degree murder. DNA from the Jeep matched Diane's blood. Kristine's body showed fresh bruises from Wilson's grip, and his own words sealed the case. Wade Stephen Wilson didn't bother with a fancy alibi when the police first grilled him after his October 8, 2019, arrest. He confessed outright, bragging about the murders like trophies. But as the case built toward trial, his defense team shifted gears, painting him not as a cold-blooded killer, but as a broken man lost to drugs and a battered brain. They claimed his heavy methamphetamine use on the day of the crimes, combined with childhood head injuries from 4 concussions, left him in a meth-fueled haze, too impaired to form the intent for premeditated murder. He was whacked out of his mind, his lawyer Lee Hollander argued in closing, pointing to Wilson's erratic history and untreated mental health woes. No one denied he did the acts. The defense just fought to spare him the needle, hoping for life without parole by humanizing the chaos that shaped him. Prosecutors tore that story apart with ironclad evidence. They played the chilling phone recordings of Wilson's confessions to his father, showed DNA linking him to both crime scenes, blood and scratches in the Jeep, fibers on Kristine's body, and paraded witnesses like Melissa, who described his violent attack hours before the killings, and Stephanie Sailors, who saw him last with Kristine that morning. Surveillance footage captured the stolen Jeep speeding through Cape Coral, and autopsy photos revealed the brutal strangulation marks, proving Wilson knew exactly what he was doing. His own words, "I just wanted to do it," echoed in the courtroom, shattering any claim of blackout. The defense's experts testified to brain scans showing trauma, but the states countered that drugs, not destiny, drove the rage, and Wilson showed no remorse, even smirking at times. The trial kicked off on June 3, 2024, in Fort Myers Lee County Courthouse, drawing packed galleries and national eyes, partly because of Wilson's Deadpool Killer nickname, from his shared name with the Marvel anti-hero. Over 12 tense days, the jury heard gut-wrenching victim impact statements: Kristine's mom, battling Alzheimer's, reliving the loss in loops; Diane's sons, Zane and Brandon, mourning the mom who'd never see them grow. Key moments gripped everyone: Testaseca's tearful testimony about the calls, the graphic photos of Diane's mangled body found under vultures, and Wilson's stoic stare as his adoptive parents' letter begged for mercy, calling him a joyful child. The system failed. The defense rested without witnesses, banking on sympathy, but the prosecution hammered home the cold calculation: 2 strangers killed in hours for no reason but thrill. On June 12, 2024, after just 2 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered a swift guilty verdict on all counts: 2 first-degree murders, plus grand theft, battery, burglary, and petty theft. The penalty phase followed, weighing aggravators like the heinous, atrocious, and cruel nature of the deaths, Diane's especially cold, calculated, and premeditated, against mitigators like Wilson's rough youth. On June 25th, the split jury recommended death anyway. 9-3 for Kristine, 10-2 for Diane, meeting Florida's post-2023 threshold of 8 votes. Judge Nicholas Thompson, after a Spencer hearing for extra evidence like fresh brain scans, denied the defense's July 3rd motion for a new trial on August 15th. Then on August 27, 2024, in a packed courtroom thick with emotion, he sealed Wilson's fate. 2 death sentences, 1 for each life stolen. The aggravating factors greatly outweigh the mitigators, Thompson ruled as victims' families cheered and hugged. Wilson, now 30 and inked with prison tattoos including a swastika, sat stone-faced, his appeals already filed to Florida's Supreme Court. But with the gavel's echo, the journey from barroom stranger to death row monster ended. For now. Behind the razor-wire fences of Florida's Union Correctional Institution in Rayford, Wade Stephen Wilson entered a world of stark isolation, his death sentence a heavy shadow over every locked door. Transferred there on August 30th, 2024, just days after his sentencing, Wilson joined the ranks of over 270 men on death row, housed in a wing where the air hangs thick with humidity and the hum of fluorescent lights. The prison, a sprawling concrete fortress about 45 miles southwest of Jacksonville, holds inmates in tiny 6-by-9-foot cells stacked like forgotten boxes, each with a thin mattress, a stainless steel toilet sink combo, and no air conditioning to cut the relentless Florida heat. Death row men wear orange T-shirts to mark them as the condemned, paired with the same blue pants as general population, a subtle reminder of their separate fate. Meals come 3 times a day, early at 5 a.m., then 10:30 a.m., and around 4 p.m. Simple fare like oatmeal, sandwiches, or mystery meat, eaten alone under the watchful eyes of guards who count heads hourly. Showers are quick, handcuffed escorts to a communal area, and exercise means an hour in a fenced yard, pacing under the sun or staring at the sky. Radios and small 13-inch TVs offer some escape, tuned to basic channels without cable. But the real torment is the waiting, the endless tick of time in a place where hope feels as barred as the cells. Wilson's days settled into this grim routine, but his behavior painted a picture of defiance rather than reflection. Classified at maximum custody, he spent most hours confined to his cell, emerging only for yard time, medical checks, or legal visits. Guards describe a man who hasn't softened. A 163-page disciplinary report from July 2025 details multiple infractions in his first year. Disrespecting staff, refusing orders, even minor assaults that landed him in solitary. In July 2025, he was briefly moved to Sewanee Correctional Institution, a lower security spot without a death row unit, perhaps for evaluation or overcrowding. But by late August, he was back at Union, his swastika tattoos and white supremacist ties making him a target among inmates. Interactions with others are limited. Death row forbids contact visits, so conversations happen through glass or in controlled groups, where Wilson reportedly keeps to himself, avoiding the gangs he once glorified. No letters from a changed man have surfaced publicly. His adoptive parents' plea for mercy at trial was their last word. And even then, it highlighted a system failure more than his redemption. Remorse, it never came. From his post-murder boast to the courtroom's stone-faced stare, Wilson showed none. His biological father's testimony confirming a chilling lack of regret, even in confession. Religion hasn't entered the story. No baptisms or prayers mentioned in records. And his focus seems fixed on survival, not salvation. As the appeals drag on, does the weight of those stolen lives ever pierce the silence of his cell? Or has the monster he became grown numb to it all? Wilson's path to the execution chamber is a marathon of legal hurdles, far from the swift end his crimes might demand. Sentenced under Florida's 2023 law, lowering the jury threshold for death from unanimous to 8-4, a change his team argues violates ex post facto rules since the murders happened in 2019. His direct appeal kicked off immediately. Filed September 15, 2024, it hit the Florida Supreme Court by May 2nd, 2025, with briefs challenging the jury's non-unanimous vote, brain injury evidence, and prosecutorial decisions. A status hearing came in October 2024, but as of September 10, 2025, the case lingers in early stages, with the state responding in oral arguments possibly months away. If denied, federal habeas corpus and more appeals could stretch years, even decades. Florida's average wait is 13 to 14 years, and outliers like Tommy Zeigler have lingered since 1976. No death warrant from Governor Ron DeSantis yet. Florida's executions halted from 2020 to 2022 amid drug shortages and lawsuits, resuming in 2023 but slowly. Wilson's ties to white supremacist groups and the law's controversy add layers, drawing petitions for clemency from unlikely fans. Until all doors close and clemency fails, he waits, not for redemption, but for the system's final word. Will the appeals buy him a lifetime, or hasten the end his victims' families crave? In the end, Wade Wilson's story is a grim reminder of unchecked rage and the fractured justice it unleashes. 2 lives erased in hours, now echoing in a nation's debate on punishment. But was true justice served in sentencing him to death? Or does his case expose deeper flaws in how we handle the broken and the brutal? Share your thoughts below and hit that subscribe button to join our growing community. See you in the next video.